Tonight, we're going to be talking about a subject that I know is very important to many of our instructors, and of course, many of our friends out there, and that's developing meaningful command training. And what does it look like in departments? Training their incident commanders, what's good look like, what's bad look like. And tonight I'm joined by our instructors, Kevin Burgess and Frank Malta. And we're going to be sharing a little bit about things that we've done in our different departments, things that we've seen on the road, and trying to give you guys some ideas if you're looking to kind of tweak your command training or maybe even develop your first stuff. So, that's kind of be what we're going to be getting into tonight. What I'm talking about here, let's kind of identify the problem first. And yesterday, actually, Chris Mullendor, also from Frederick, and I were out in Lee Summit, Missouri, doing a command program for a bunch of departments around that area. And, the conversation kind of kicked off talking about some of this because one of the things that I kind of began identifying is I've started this thing now when I go to classes around the country, and you've heard it and everything, where I'm like, hey, here in Alaska or here in, Florida, wherever we are, you guys got firefighter training? Yep, sure do. You got hazmat training. Oh yeah, technician level, right? You got stuff where people can hang off buildings upside down on ropes. Sure enough, right? Can I, you got stuff where I can go play in a trench or get in a confined space. And of course, everybody has all these things. And then I'll kind of ask them and say, all right, well, here in your state, then, like, what class is it that you go to be the person in charge of the fire, right? We have firefighter training, we got driver operator training, we got technical rescue and hazmat training. But the experience that I've seen, and I've been a firefighter in 6 different states now, and I think we've taught in most of the rest of the states, is like, I'm not keeping hard data on it, but what would you guys say? Like 90% of states don't even have a curriculum, for command officer training. Is that pretty accurate?
At least. Yeah. No standard or no certification or nothing the state offers for it.
Yeah. And I don't think Maryland still does at this point, do they?
So I know like recently they've incorporated like some simulation stuff in some of the fire officer programs through MIFRE, but as you can imagine, these are state written programs that Central Maryland's very different from the Eastern Shore. It's very different than Western Maryland. So it's a program that's written to encompass everyone. So though it's something, in my opinion, I think it's missing the mark.
Well, Frank, you kind of mentioned that in Frederick, I mean, that you're literally just kicking off the new program today. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, how you got there, what this, where Frederick County is and why you're there?
Yeah, sure. So I guess to start, like the command competency thing, like we had dabbled in it for years, nothing very formal. We had like some of the early versions of like the simulation training, like the ones you played with like a Xbox controller, and for its time, like it worked, but it wasn't like on a formal like in time interval that how often you had to do it. It wasn't mandated. It was kind of just something like, hey, let's go give this a try. Um, and then in 2021, no secret, we had a line of duty death, fire on 9510 Ball Road that took the life of Captain Josh Laird. And, so there was a report like with any line of duty death. And within our internal report, it made mention of strong consideration should be into running a command competency program. So wrote the job description, got the position approved. We hired a guy who's absolutely emphatic about incident command, and then we started the very arduous process of building the program, which was acquiring the technology, 24 iPads, the software, headsets, TVs, all the stuff. And then the research portion of it, where we visited a lot of places. We went to Montgomery County, which for the state of Maryland was probably like the pioneer of incident command, or at least the formalized incident command. We went to DC, who's got a great program. Anne Arundel County had a great program. So we visited a lot of places and kind of saw what they were doing. And then, took some of those ideas and made them work here in Frederick County, and I'd like to think took some of those ideas and made them better. Um, so yeah, we built it out. We wrote policies, for the program, kind of explaining how it was going to go, what you were going to need to do to be able to sit for the competency. So we require 12 hours of continuing education every year to even sit for it. Um, explain the ground rules. If you're not successful, um, you'll have to remediate, and once you get to so many remediations, then you have a conversation with the fire chief and maybe come to the conclusion it's not for you. But yeah, just building out the program is coming up with realistic scenarios that jive with your policies and procedures, and as much realism as possible. And not to get too far ahead, but I think there's a lot of programs where the incident commander essentially starts the scenario and everything rolls out with him being there, which is seldom the case around here. So, we have a delay, we have a response, to the simulation location, where they have to listen to radio transmissions, do run route reorganization, you know, um, acknowledge, missing information on some of the on scene reports and stuff like that. So, it's as much realism as possible, and then we have a whole room full of role players that are playing the different units on the box alarm. They're reading off of a script, but there's also somebody in the room that's like the maestro, if you will, who serves like when things have to be ad lib. They're the one to make that decision so that it kind of stays as uniform as possible, and everybody's getting a similar experience as they can, and it works out really good. If the unit that you are a role player for is operating on the inside, you're wearing a mask. If if your units are out of position or making noises, we have a soundboard that inputs noises to be distractions. So trying to make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah, that's got to be fun, like a soundboard. The first thing I thought about when you said that is like, you remember the old megaphone from Radio Shack that had like 99 sounds and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's like
That's what I need. The So you mentioned like 12 hours of continuing education, I think. What does that continuing education look like? And it also, like, so for a, like, this program is for both new and existing ICs, right?
correct.
And so is there especially for new ICs, is there a training program that goes with it to like get them ready for the evaluation?
Um, yes. Well, so for starters, like new ICs, like all of our people that are on the battalion chief list, the acting battalion chiefs, they go through like their version of an OCS, and there's simulations built into that. That's also part of their workbook. When to get out of OCS, they got to do so many ride-alongs. They have to do so many simulations and stuff like that. But yes, leading up to the competency, do you guys hear that echo in the background? It's echoing like crazy on mine. Okay. All right. So, but anyway, I'm sorry. So to building up to the competency, there's certain we are mandated, by policy to offer 36 hours worth of Con Ed a year, and so we do that, but we have some that are mandatory, and so I guess to differentiate between the two, um, if you take anything that's incident command, safety, leadership, tactics, all that stuff applies, right? So like that would count towards some of your Con Ed, but then we also have mandatory stuff, which is um, kind of like stuff that's specific to what the competency is going to be. Now we don't let people know ahead of time like what it's going to be, but we may put a lot of emphasis on the gas leak policy or the structure fire policy or an MCI policy, which forces people to get in the books and review the material ahead of time, right? So there's different ways you could look at that. Like, are you letting the cat out of the bag, or is the win even bigger because you're forcing people to get in the books? So, um, So yeah, that's how that goes. People, because we do this for both career and volunteer. So how in a volunteer fire service, if somebody steps down and they appoint a chief officer midway through the year, then we have the ability, and we will run a simulation like out of off schedule, if you will, to accommodate them. And then we kind of prorate the con ed. So if they get picked up in like May or June and the comp season in August, then they're just responsible for however many hours leading up the months leading up to the competency, if that makes sense.
So you brought up a good point there. I'm sure some people are curious about is, so you have both career battalion chiefs and assistant chiefs. I mean, you have career chief officers, and then you also have volunteer chief officers. Does the same standard apply to both of them?
Yeah, so we have our policies, like our training requirements to hold ranks, was recently revamped within the last year or two, so that there's parity across both sides, which in my opinion, like there's no other way. And yeah, the for them to be able to function as chief officers, they got to go through the competency. So um, yeah, so the same applies across both sides for sure.
Well, you want to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing here in Salisbury, or what we've been doing?
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of what I went through and why we made changes. When I was getting checked off as an acting battalion 6-7 years ago, we would just do ride time. Like, you took a test to be a captain and all that, and you'd get promoted to captain. If they wanted you to be an acting battalion chief, you would ride with your battalion for 6-10 shifts. I don't remember precisely how many shifts it was, but I would be riding around with a battalion chief with 20-30 years on the job, and I would be asking, okay, what about this, or how do you know that? And I would get like, you just have to do it. And to me, that seemed insane, because when my first day of the academy, when I said, how do you get the hose off the truck? They were like, we're going to teach you. We're going to show you how. There's an algorithm to it. There's steps to it. And when it came to command, it was kind of like, you got to, this whole idea of like, you got to smell it, you got to feel it, and you got to get, your cigar out or whatever, and you'll just figure it out. And to me, I was thinking like, okay, that's great, but like, what if my first fire doesn't go so good? Like, I can understand the idea of like 20 years into commanding these fires, I have this good gist of it.
Right.
But what happens if the first couple fires go bad?
There's a mayday.
And I don't know what to do, because I've never experienced it before. And so that was very nerve-wracking to me. And not to put down the chiefs that I rode with or anything, they were doing what happened to them. They got thrown in a car, and the guys before them kind of told them the same thing, like, get out here, kid, and figure it out. And that's why I like, kind of what we moved to try to get people as many reps as we can. And the other thing is, as an acting battalion chief today, like, realistically, how many fires am I going to be in command of a year? Could be none, could be 10. So what we do now is we do very similarly to Chief Malta and Frederick. We do simulation training. It's mandatory annually. It's a 5-day class annually for every command qualified officer has to attend the class. And anybody who wants to be an acting battalion can take the 5-day class as well. It's 2 days classroom and 3 days of simulations. It's everything from, they have to be checked off on every building type, a mayday, a tactical withdrawal, and a defensive fire operation. They have to pass every one. I think it's like 7 or 8 distinct things they have to pass.
Yeah.
And then quarterly, we do the entire shift does simulation training. Kind of I don't want to repeat almost exactly what Chief Malta was describing of the battalion chief could be the first one there or the last one there. They really are driving the vehicle with real radio traffic happening and added noises and maydays before they get there and all kinds of things. And so that's quarterly. There's an opportunity where each shift is probably going to run 6 simulations. So, if they have a battalion chief and 2 acting, they would each get 2 simulations a day or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and like I'm just thinking of random things while you're talking about that. I mean, was this year I think we added into the battalion program, the class and everything, that there are written exams every day. And so, I mean, it's and I mean, I don't think they're BS. They're not BS. The questions on are real. If you don't know the answer, it's a problem. And I think it's important that part of this stuff is if you're going to be the person. I was raised in an environment where, like, if you're going to be an officer, if you're going to be a chief, well, then you better know, everything everybody else knows. You better, you don't. And it's not an ego thing. It's not like, oh, I'm the big bugles, I got to know. But like, if your firefighter knows the SOGs better than you do, how are you in a better position to command the fire? You know what I'm saying? Like, you've got to be an expert and you've got to understand the details. And like, I want our chiefs to know the policies inside and out, and I want them to understand the concepts inside and out, because that's what we've tried to do. And obviously a lot of what we've done, what I've done in the departments I've worked for has kind of bled over into what we're teaching here. Is like, I don't want people to understand what to do. I want them to know how to think. Like, I liken it all the time to the pumping thing. And Frank's an engine guy. He's heard me say this before, but like, the new fire trucks, they all got the electronic, pump controller on it, and it's got a preset button, and the preset button is probably set to whatever is necessary for the cross lay. And I mean, so why are we making all this big rigmarole? Why am I trying to teach these guys how to do math on a fire ground? Just put it in pump, bro, and hit the preset button. How how many fires you could put out just by hitting the preset button? Probably most. Probably most. But the problem is that if that's all you understand, if you just know this, how to do this thing, and one night you pull up on a fire and it's one of those scenarios where you've got to get water out of a rock and, charge 7 hose lines with 5 discharges, and you've really got to understand the real mechanics and the real math and the real concepts behind pumping, you're going to be shit out of luck. And it ain't going to happen because all you know is the preset button. And the same thing is with command, right? It is, or really probably with anything, is if you just are regurgitating what you said every other fire, or you're just repeating what you heard the guy before you say, like, the scary thing is that'll probably get you through a bunch of fires. But if you don't really understand the concepts, one night you're going to be way out of your league. And as I said, as I always say about command, the scariest thing about command is you can command a fire however you want to, and you can command, your command post can be wherever you want it to be. You are almost certainly not going to be the person that gets killed on the fire ground. It's going to be one of your people. And I think that's the most terrifying thing for any incident commander, is to think about that what I might do or not do personally on tonight's fire might get one of my guys killed. And that's, you got to understand the concepts.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of parrot command out there where we're just doing whatever it is we heard on the radio as captains or whatever we were taught. I think there's a lot of where we're sitting here with random check boxes, like make sure I get the power company on the scene. And I don't think that we're really diving down to like what Chief Malta was talking about earlier with, do I have, too many people doing the same thing? What thing am I not doing? What is the problem in 5 minutes? And one of the things I really like about the way we do sims is like, sometimes, like, we never know what sims are going to be like. I could have all my companies arrive exactly like they're supposed to, and there could be no problem. But a lot of times, like, I'm sitting in the buggy and I'm nervous because I've run fires where you were controlling it, where half of my companies were on a pin in. Mm-hmm. I got there and there was, 7 volunteers parked. There was people hanging out of windows. There was a mayday. And, a lot of people think, well, that's crazy. Well, the time that all that happens to me, better, the first time better not be at a fire. Mm-hmm. Because, I better have trained and prepared and thought through a lot of that. Because if the first time I ever command a mayday is at a fire, it's probably not going to go very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think like KB brings up a valid point, right? Like, command, I think people that do it, they end up laying up short because the mayday, right? Like, that's, you got to train for it. And I don't know if some people are scared to do it, like they don't want to jinx themselves or whatever the case may be. but that's absolutely a very integral part of commanding a fire, right? Because it typically happens with minimal to no notice, and you got to react. And that's whether your red team's in place. That's whether all your companies are on the scene, whether you're even on the scene, and the fire doesn't care. Do what it does, and you're the one that's got to react to that.
Yeah, well, and I think a scary thing that really, makes that exponential is, the three of us are frequently in an environment where we're going to have multiple chief officers on the scene, and so you got somebody else to lean on. You got somebody to watch your back to catch what you miss, and we know from traveling around the country that a large majority of guys out there, they're commanding very challenging fires completely by themselves. And, they got no help. They got no aid. They got no chief officer in the rear. They got no division supervisors or anything like that. And they're doing the best they can. Wow. Things we've seen in command training. If you want to really mess someone up, give them unit numbers that they're not dealing with, and it doesn't have to be like some crazy number. Just if you don't have an engine 5, put an engine 5 in there, and they're like, what? And it's blowing their mind. Or you mentioned it earlier, the other thing that we saw is when we started doing the drive around the block thing, that floored some people. Like, they were in the buggy and they had their command board out and like the radio in their lap, and I'm like, all right, when this thing gets dispatched, you have to drive around the block. And for us, it wasn't like the block at the training academy. It was a city block. And our headquarters fire station is on a street where things can be pretty wild sometimes. And so having to go up and around that block, you can see some wild things while you're doing it. But that's, like you were saying, Frank, that's that real world challenge of having to drive yourself, having to be in the wrong lane of traffic while you're listening to where companies are going, and remember it when you get there.
Oh yeah, I mean anything can happen. The streets blocked. You get held up by a train. You get behind a tractor trailer on a street that they can't pull over. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different variables that can cause that delay. In a perfect world, it'd be great if you always showed up with the first due engine company, but that around here, that's seldom the case.
Right. Right.
And I think in anything that we're talking about, what you guys are alluding to here is you need to make it as real as possible. If you're just going to sit and listen to your guys call maydays, they need to put their mask on, and you need to go to wherever it is you command fires from, and it needs to be that. If that's out in the cold, in the rain, and next to a running engine, that's what you need to go do it. And like Chief was saying, like, if you're going to drive, whatever worksheet you're going to fill out, if you're running fake boxes or false boxes or whatever, and you're going to command them, or whether you're doing this full simulated fire, do it right. Because I'll see even in sims, like, people will be like, well, I don't need to sit in the car. I'll just sit in the classroom. But, like, well, you're not going to command this fire from the classroom.
No.
You need to do it real life.
Yep.
And I'm not saying there's not a time to, like, walk, crawl, run, like we talk about, like learning how to fill the board out. But if you're going to do these things, you need to do them as realistic as you can. Get those reps as close to what it's going to be like as you can, because you can't just make up the bad fire.
Mm-hmm.
Or you certainly don't want to. You don't want to go, if you have a lot, you say it all the time, if you got a ton of practice running maydays, maybe you should look at your operations.
Yeah, if you've done so many real maydays, you're good.
Yeah.
You don't need to practice it. Like, okay, but maybe there's another issue there.
Yeah.
And like the other thing is, don't always make your simulations go like a perfect fire where everybody takes their assignment and everything goes great. Have somebody blow an assignment, have somebody lose water in their line, have people trapped in the rear, and you got a tough door that we can't get. We need somebody around here. Put the pressure on. And I'm not saying that's where you start, but it's absolutely where you should end up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the whole theme, kind of what we've been talking about tonight and everything, is like, people that are on the bay floor, people that are listening to podcasts and stuff like this, like, these people are into the job. They're out there forcing the door prop 6 times a shift. They're out there stretching lines off the rig or off the prop. They're doing mask up drills in the bay. And I think, we're on a good swing in the fire service right now where we see motivated firefighters, really kind of looking for the better mousetrap, right? They're trying to get a better skill. They're trying to get better at the skill that they have, and they're putting a lot of work into that engine and truck company level tasks and tactics. And we need that. That's the heart. That's the heart of the fireground. Like I said, the command doesn't put the fire out. The engine and truck work puts the fire out. So we don't want to minimize that. What we need to add to that is the passion for the command training. We need to have. I say it all the time. Like, you take these high performance, high energy engine and truck companies that are out there training and preparing every day, and they're working their ass off, and they're rock stars on the fireground. If you can take them and pair them with an incident commander that is as passionate and as skilled at strategy and tactics and command and control as they are at engine and truck work, and you put those forces together on a fireground, that's where you can do some exponential things. And that's, I think we're on an upswing. I think we're getting some momentum with the command training and the command interest nationwide, but I think we can do better. And I think that's the next place that the fire service needs to go. So you just finished listening to a portion of one of our members only podcasts exclusive on the Bay Floor. The Bay Floor is our special firefighting community where we can get like-minded firefighters together away from the noise of traditional social media to talk shop and talk about what really matters. We look to bring our members a lot of special content and training tips and resources, including our live webinars, our members-only podcasts, training bulletins, as well as the ability to interact and discuss with other like-minded firefighters. One of the things we bring to our community is these private members-only podcasts that allow us to get a little bit more in depth and address the questions and concerns that you guys bring to us in a more private environment. So if you like what you heard, then make sure you jump on thebayfloor.com to hear the rest of this conversation, as well as being able to access our podcasts from the past, in the future, our upcoming webinars, training bulletins, and all the other training resources that the Bay Floor has to offer. Make sure you check us out on thebayfloor.com.